नहमदुहु व नुसल्ली अला रसूलिहिल करीम अम्मा बादु वल हुब्बु फिल्लाहि वल बुग़्दु फिल्लाहि मिनल ईमान रब्बि इश्रह ली सदरी व यस्सिर ली अमरी वहलुल उक़दतम मिन लिसानी यफ़क़हू क़ौली या रब्बि सल्लि व सल्लिम दाइमन अबदन अला हबीबिका खैरिल खल्क़ि कुल्लिहिम। My respected elders, my young friends, my brothers, and my mothers and sisters. Imam Bukhari rahmatullah alayhi is saying to love and to hate for the sake of Allah is part of Iman. Now this deed of loving someone or hating someone is so beloved to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala that Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wa sallam says in a hadith, Man ahabba lillahi wa abghada lillahi wa a'ta lillahi wa mana'a lillahi faqad istakmala al-iman. He who loves for the sake of Allah and hates for the sake of Allah, and when he gives for the sake of Allah, and when he refuses to give for the sake of Allah, his iman has become complete. When on one occasion someone asked Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam which deeds are more beloved to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam replied, Al-hubbu fillahi wal-bughdu fillahi. He said, the most beloved deeds to Allah are to love and to hate for the sake of Allah. Now, maybe we may understand the meaning of loving someone for the sake of Allah, which means there should be no worldly interest involved. We just love someone because he is a pious person or he is a servant of Allah, we love him. Now, what does it mean by hating someone for the sake of Allah? This is a bit difficult to understand, to hate someone for the sake of Allah. Maulana Ashraf Ali Thani rahmatullah alayhi, he explains. He says, when a pious person comes to know about someone that he has committed a sin, when someone finds out so and so, he's committing sins, he's a very evil person, he's not a good person. So naturally, in his heart, he will feel this dislikeness. That why is he committing these sins? Now, he says, the one whom you found about is committing sins, either he will be your relative, you will have a blood relation with him, or he's a stranger, or he's not related to you. He says, if someone's son has committed a sin, now the father, when he finds out my son committed a sin, now, if he is a religious father, he will dislike it. He won't like it. Why my son has committed a sin? But along with his dislikeness, he will make a dua for his son. Not only himself, he may go to a pious person and request or make a dua for my son. He is involved in these evil activities. So now here, there is a hatred. But at the same time, there is a love attached to it. He's making a dua for him. and he is asking others to make a dua for his son so that he gives up all these sins. Maulana Shareef rahmatullah alayhi says, if this very same feeling you have for another person, then this hatred will be for the sake of Allah. Meaning, when we come to know someone is committing sins, and we make a dua to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala that, oh Allah, he is your servant, and he is committing sins, and he is displeasing you, oh Allah, create the hatred of this sin in his heart. This hate, although, from the heart, we dislike, we hate the sins, why is he committing sins? But at the same time, we have a sympathy for him, affection for him. So this, if the love and affection is attached to our hatred, then this hatred will be for the sake of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And our Prophet sallallahu alayhi wa sallam, he says, when إذا أحب الرجل أخاه فليخبره أنه يحبه. When someone loves someone for the sake of Allah, then he should inform him that he loves him. Now the ulama, they say, what is the wisdom behind informing the person that I love you? What's the reason why he should tell him that I love you? They say the reason behind this is, when this person will tell him that I love you, then what will happen in return? He will also start loving him. Oh, he loves me. He loves me, and then he will have a respect in his heart. This person, for the sake of Allah, he is loving him. Just about, I think about a year or 2 years ago, somebody came here, and a father came to me. He said, Maulana, I've got one thing to tell you. I said, what's that? Because my son yesterday or today was telling me, I love Mullah Riaz for the sake of Allah. He said, I said to him, don't you love me? I'm your father. He said, of course I love you, you're my dad. But I love Mullah Riaz for the sake of Allah. Since when he told me this, his son, I used to see him here and there. But since he told me that he loves me, believe me, there's a place, in my heart for him. He loves me for the sake of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Since then, I really, this is the nature. When you look at the hadith of Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, he says, when you love someone, you tell him that you love him. Because in return, he will start loving you, he will start respecting you. So since he told me this, when I see him, when he meets me, I have this in my mind, this person, he loves me for the sake of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And I have a special place for him in my heart. I love him. Since then, before I knew him, but since he told me this, I have more respect for him. I have, I started, liking and loving him. So Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam said, even a Prophet he himself, he used to tell the Sahabas. Once he said to Hazrat Mu'adh, he said, Wallahi ya Mu'adh, inni la uhibbuka. By Allah, O Mu'adh, I love you. He said, O Mu'adh, I love you. And then he said, while he was telling him this, he said, O Mu'adh, I love you. And also I advised you something. And he advised him, he said, لا تدعن في دبر كل صلاة تقول اللهم أعني على ذكرك وشكرك وحسن عبادتك. He said, O Mu'adh, I love you for the sake of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and also I advise you not to miss this dua after every salah. Allahumma a'inni ala dhikrika wa shukrika wa husni ibadatik. Oh Allah, you help me so that I remember you in the best manner, and I thank you in the best manner, and I worship you in the best manner. Shaykh al-Islam Ibn Taymiyyah, he was a great Imam, and not only he was a great Imam, he was a great wali of Allah. It is mentioned, Imam Ibn Jawzi rahmatullah mentions that Ibn Taymiyyah in his sajda, very often he used to make this dua. Allahumma a'inni ala dhikrika wa shukrika wa husni ibadatik. We should learn this, remember this dua. As I said before, if you find it difficult to learn the wordings of these words, just know the meaning, and in your language, just make a dua to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Allah, I seek your help. That you help me so that I can properly, remember you, worship you, and thank you. So Mu'adh radiallahu ta'ala anhu, Abu Sa'id al-Khawlani, he was a Ta'abi. He says that once I was in Syria, I went into the masjid and I saw, Faida Fatan, Baraku Thanaya. I saw this young man, whose teeth were very, bright. He is describing this man by saying that his teeth were very bright. Now, what did he mean by his teeth were very bright, shining? They say, this young man, I will tell you now who this young man was. And this young man, he said, I saw people around him. He was sitting, young man, and he's sitting, and people are sitting around him. When these people who were sitting around him, when they differed over anything, they would refer it to him, they would ask him, and then whatever he said to them, they would act upon his advice. So then I asked him, and I said, who he is? Who is this young man? So they said, he is Muaz bin Jabal, Sahabi Rasul. He is Muaz bin Jabal. So he said, now let me explain to you why did he say he had bright teeth? Meaning they say Muaz bin Jabal, he used to, all the time he used to smile. He used to smile. So in order to describe him, he said, his teeth were shining, meaning he always used to smile. If you look at the Prophet ﷺ, the Sahaba, he always, used to smile. And in very few occasions we find that he laughed. But at the majority of times he would smile. So he said, when they told me that he is Muaz bin Jabal, and I mentioned before, I think that he was only 18 when he became Muslim, when he embraced Islam, Muaz bin Jabal radiallahu ta'ala anhu. So he said, but I thought to myself, well, I want to meet him. So he said, I decided to meet him next day in the morning at Fajr prayer. He said, I hastened to the masjid. I went quickly. When I went to the masjid, I already found him in the masjid. He was already there engaged performing salah. He said, what I did, I just sat behind him, waited until he completed his prayer. The ulama, they say under this hadith, they say when you find someone who is engaged in his ibadat, and also, we should remember, when we approach someone, they say we should go and approach him from the front, not from the back, from the front. And Abu Idris Khawlani, he says that I waited until he completed the prayer. When he completed the prayer, I approached him from the front, from his face side, I came to him. So the ulama, they say, we should always, when somebody is engaged in the ibadat, we should wait until he finishes the ibadat, and then we talk to him, and then we ask him. I can remember a few years ago, I was sitting there making a dua, and this person comes to me, sits right in front of me. He wanted to ask something, and I was, busy doing making dua. He comes and he sits, right in front of me, just in front of me, because he wanted to ask, and he couldn't say anything because I was just making dua, but he just sits in front of me. So the ulama, they say that when somebody is engaged in his wazifa or in his ibadah, we should behind the wait, and we shouldn't sit in front of him so that his concentration is not affected. When you're in ibadah, when somebody comes right in front of you and sits right in front of you face to face, what's going to happen? Your concentration will be affected by his presence. So he said he was sitting and he was offering the prayer, and I just sat behind him. When he completed the prayer, I just went from his face, from the front, and I gave him salam. When I gave him salam, then I said to him, I love you for the sake of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. He said, really? You love me? I said, yes, I really love you for the sake of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Then Mu'adh, he says, he got hold of my cloak and he drew me near him and he said, Abshir, I'm giving you the glad tidings that I heard Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam on one occasion saying that قال الله تعالى وجبت محبتي للمتحابين فيا والمتجالسين فيا والمتزاورين فيا والمتبادلين فيا. That I heard Rasulullah on one occasion, I heard Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam saying that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has said, the Hadith Qudsi, Allah is saying that my muhabbat, my love is due to those who love for my sake and who, when they sit together, they sit for my sake. And when they give one another or when they visit one another, they visit one another for my sake and they give one another for my sake. Meaning giving, when you give gift to someone or when you give in the charity to a poor person, you give for the sake of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wa sallam, he said that Allah is saying, those who love one another for my sake and those who give one another for my sake, my muhabbat is due to them and it has become compulsory for them. Our Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, he says, one of them, it was the custom, the sunnah of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, he would always relate the stories of, the previous communities. He said, one of the men, a man, he set out of his house and he was going to meet another person in another city or in a village. While he was going, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala sent an angel in the form of a human being. And the angel said to him, where are you going? He said, I am going to meet so-and-so in another village. He said, why? Has he got any favor on you? Has he done any favor to you? Or you have done any favor to him? He said, no, I haven't done any favor to him. So he said, why are you going? He said, I'm going to meet him for the sake of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So then the angel informed, he said, look, I am an angel from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has sent me to let you know that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala loves you as you love him. So this deed of loving someone for the sake of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is such that this person becomes beloved of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Then Allah Almighty starts loving this person. Now, how can we adopt this amal and how can we bring this in amal in our communities or within ourselves? This amal of loving one another for the sake of Allah. Our Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam has taught us how to gain this amal and how to adopt this amal. He said that, وَالَّذِي نَفْسِ بِيَدِهِ. He said, by Allah, in whose control my life is, لَا تَدْخُلُوا الْجَنَّةَ حَتَّى تُؤْمِنُوا. You cannot enter paradise until you are believers. Meaning, only the believers will enter paradise. Only the believers, Allah will let them enter paradise. And he said, you cannot become complete believers until you love one another. And then he said, أَوَلَا أَدُلُّكُمْ عَلَى شَيْءٍ إِذَا فَعَلْتُمُوهُ تَحَبَّبْتُمْ. Shall I not inform you of something? If you do it, you will start loving one another. The Sahaba said, yes, let us know, O Prophet of Allah, and tell us what it is. He said, أَفْشُوا السَّلَامَ بَيْنَكُمْ. He said, keep on giving salam to one another. Through salam, because of salam, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will create this sifat and this quality in you that you will start loving one another. Just imagine, look at the impact of salam, giving the greeting one another. It is such, our Prophet said, as-salam ala man arafta wa man lam ta'rif. In this day and age, we may only give salam to whom we know and those whom we recognize and we know. But Rasulullah said, give salam to those whom you do not know and those whom you know. Today, we will only give salam to those, whom we know. But our Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam is saying, give even salam to those you don't know. So he said, spread the salam, promote salam in the communities. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, through this, my sunnah, He will create love in your hearts, which means we will start loving one another, for the sake of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. If today in our hearts, if there is any grudge and any hatred for one another, it's because we have given up the sunnah of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. Once we start, bringing the sunnah of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, once we start reviving the sunnah of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, then we will see, the impact of the sunnah, that we will start loving one another. So Imam Bukhari rahmatullah is saying that Iman, loving for the sake of Allah and disliking for the sake of Allah, is part of Iman, meaning through this deed, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala increases the Iman of a believer. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala accept this majlis. Allahumma salli ala Sayyidina wa Maulana Muhammadin wa ala alihi wa sahbihi wa barik wa sallim. ربنا اغفر لنا ذنوبنا وإسرافنا في أمرنا وثبت أقدامنا وانصرنا على القوم الكافرين. ربنا آتنا في الدنيا حسنة وفي الآخرة حسنة وقنا عذاب النار. اللهم إنا نسألك حبك، حب من يحبك، حب عمل يقرب إلى حبك. ربنا تقبل منا إنك أنت السميع العليم وتب علينا إنك أنت التواب الرحيم. وصلى الله على خير خلقه محمد وعلى آله وأصحابه أجمعين برحمتك